Welcome back to the 21 Boom Guided Meditation Series. I will be your guide this evening. This is Coach Zach Feeney. The practice of mindfulness is a very simple practice of using your awareness or your attention in order to do two primary things. One is to take a closer look at the life you are living, not the life you imagine you are living in the future or the life you hope you have lived in the past, but take a closer look at the life you are living, which is always here in your lived experience of here and now. So take a closer look. And contemplatives love different languages for the idea of that closer look. One of them is the idea of intimacy. So in the Buddha literature, they love the idea that mindfulness is a kind of intimacy with life, with all different aspects of life, to really connect with it in a deep way, to see it clearly for what it is. The wisdom that Buddhism puts a lot of value on comes not because you read a book that tells you useful knowledge, but comes from seeing our lived experience, from seeing our life in some deeper way than is usually accessible in everyday life. It isn't some kind of strange capacity to see deeply. It's just taking the capacity to see or be aware and heightening it so that we can look more carefully or use it to investigate, to understand. And so that's one function. The other primary function is that there is something about the nature of attention or awareness in its simplicity, in its utmost simplicity, that is very liberating, very freeing, very refreshing. Because usually when people pay attention to things, or even before we pay attention to things, we're already predisposed in some kind of way. And as soon as we notice something, there are all kinds of ways we react to what we are seeing. Some of those reactions are quite fine. Some are problematic and cause us a fair degree of suffering. But it's always a kind of complication. It's like if you have a simple, clear window, you can see right through to the other side. But often what happens is the window is smudged over or there's dust on it, and you can't see all the way through. So the same thing happens with this capacity to see clearly in its simplicity. It's like having a clear window, and normally our reactions, our judgments, our interpretations, our fears, our predispositions, our past history or future expectations very quickly dirty the window so that simple awareness is not there by itself. On the one hand, we're trying to see more deeply. On the other hand, seeing more deeply is also helping us to free our attention so that attention can be there in this kind of pristine simplicity. Perhaps the expression simplicity will seem to you as being simplistic. Why would you want something simple when you could have something sophisticated and wonderful? But when there's no smog in the Bay Area and you can look across the bay in that clear, clean air, that's pretty simple and it's priceless. There's something very wonderful about it. So to have a heart which is liberated and free, or an awareness which is liberated and free, is one of the goals for this practice. The marvelous thing is that this freedom is very closely connected to this capacity to pay attention. So rather than think of this capacity for liberation as some kind of abstract thing that's far into the future, there is something about the nature of the simplicity of awareness which partakes of the wonderful experience of liberation that's connected to it. So we do this mindfulness practice to develop our awareness, to heighten our awareness, to cultivate it so it's a bigger resource, a strength, a skill that we can carry with us in our lives. And one function is to help us see more deeply. And as we see more deeply, we can see the forces that drive us, that motivates us, that push us around, the forces that we react to. And we can begin making wiser choices in relationship to that. As we see the ways in which we contribute to our suffering, our pain, we can start making different choices. We can start lightening up on that. So seeing more deeply is one primary purpose. And the other is to discover something about the freedom that's found in paying attention itself. As we do this mindfulness practice, as I've been doing it, and as is often taught, we do it systematically, but it doesn't have to be taught this way. And tonight's subject is going to be emotions. Emotions are a great topic. Emotions are connected to some of the most sublime, precious, wonderful things that humans experience, and also some of the most awful things that humans experience. So it's a wide range that emotions are about. But whether it's the positive or the negative, emotions are a very important part of human life. Given that it's very important to get a sense of how to bring mindfulness to our emotional life, so we can see our emotions more clearly and we can discover freedom in relationship to them or give freedom to them. The idea of freedom is both that you can become free and that you're giving freedom to something else. It's like a two-way thing or two sides to the same coin. So there's a certain kind of freedom you can find that will allow your emotional life to flow through you much more freely than it has. And that's a really beautiful part of the practice when the emotions have this freedom. Meditation is a wonderful laboratory or arena because it's a place to have very deep trust of our emotional life. Rather than thinking that something should be denied or repressed or held onto, there's a very deep trust that what moves through us is in an emotional way is somehow trustable. Maybe not in and of itself, but it's trustable to let it move through us, to let it come and be there. And one of the reasons why it's trustable is that most emotions that people have, maybe all emotions, are a form of communication. Something is being communicated. So if you're very angry, something is being communicated. And if you shut it out or deny it, then you aren't availing yourself of what's being communicated. You're not listening to what needs to be learned or seen there. This doesn't mean you act on the anger, but that you have enough respect or trust in the process that you're willing to open to it more deeply. And what happens is that as you get a sense of how to do this in mindfulness, how to open and be present for emotions, there can be a transformation of emotions. There's an evolving, a resolution, a movement of emotions that is very clarifying, very helpful, and ultimately can be very deepening, where we see not just the surface emotions in our lives, but we start seeing some of the depth of emotional life that is often not available so easily when we go about living our normal life. And the subject being emotions. So as we keep going here, I know that there are people who have very strong opinions about emotions in our society, people who have manifestos, who are almost willing to fight about what should happen with emotions. They should celebrate emotions. They should act on every emotion. They should not express any emotions. Emotions are frightening and scary. Let's not show them to anyone, let alone to ourselves. There's a wide range of very strong attitudes that people have to emotions in our society. Probably all of you already have a relationship, consciously or unconsciously, to what we might call our emotional life. And it's very helpful in this process of mindfulness to reflect a little bit about what that relationship might be. This is something you can do. Go for a walk with a friend, journal, think about somehow. But if you can kind of explore a little bit what your relationship is to your emotional life, then that relationship is less likely to hang up the process of mindfulness. Because as you pay attention to emotions, the relationship you have to emotions might interfere with the simplicity of just noticing it. Oh, this is how it is. Right now, I'm angry. Now I'm happy. Being just very simply aware of that, as opposed to, great, I'm happy and I'm going to celebrate it and dance in the streets, or I'm angry and I'm justified in my anger and I'm going to let it rip, really get into it. The idea is to just be really simple with it. So part of mindfulness practice is learning to bring a wise attention to our emotional life. But it's important that in mindfulness practice, we don't give special value to our emotions, different than we give to our physical experience or mental experience or thoughts or the breath. From the point of view of mindfulness or awareness, it's all equal. So again, some people have these very strong ideas that emotions are what they are about, and that everything is going to be experienced through their emotions. Whereas for some people, it's like emotions, no way. I'm not even going to get close to that. And both of those are already having a relationship or a value established that there is a hierarchy of what's important and what's not. But mindfulness practice doesn't really have a hierarchy. It's just open awareness that's willing to see everything as it is. A clear window doesn't have judgment about what's in the center of the window. Many things will come past the window. So we don't want to excessively focus on emotions or insufficiently focus on them. We want to focus on them as it's appropriate. Before we do a meditation, there is a famous simile that in the Buddhist literature that was given called the simile of the arrows. And this is like one of my favorite concepts in all of this philosophy here. He was talking, the Buddha, he was talking to a gathering of people, and he asked, if a man is struck by an arrow, would that hurt the man? The assembly said, yes, that would hurt. And then the Buddha said, say the person is struck by a second arrow. Is that even more painful? And the people said, yeah, one's bad, but the second one makes it even worse. So the Buddha said, life sometimes brings you the first arrow, and the second arrow is what you shoot at yourself. This is basically what he said. So if I'm walking down the street here and I stub my toe on the sidewalk, that's the first arrow. Things like that happen, my toe hurts. The second arrow would be me telling myself, well, Zach, you are the worst walker. You are an embarrassment to humankind, and maybe you should only walk in places where people can't see you. So I've added something, and I then see that I'm having all these negative judgments about myself, but I think, well, I'm a meditation teacher or whatever. I shouldn't do that. Now I'm really embarrassed. And now I'm suffering because I think I shouldn't be doing this. So that's the third arrow. And then I get angry thinking, now here I am embarrassed again. I should know better. And that's the fourth arrow. And so the arrows go on and on and on. But it's very important to distinguish between what belongs to life, what just comes with being a human being, and what are those secondary reactions we have to it that adds to the suffering. This is a really important part of mindfulness practice. So maybe you could come here today with a headache or a backache. Those things happen. You wouldn't believe it with the good posture of some of the best practitioners of meditation, but some of them, had bad backs. But they have a bad back, and sometimes, they couldn't, and it prevents them from doing some of the most important things in their lives. So you lie down instead and have one of somebody else give a talk or something. I don't know. And that's kind of nice. So these things happen, but one of the things we want to be very careful about, like when we talked about this last week of wanting to distinguish the commentary from the experience, we want to distinguish the reaction we have from the primary situation. Are we adding a second arrow? Are we attacking it, criticizing it, running away? How are we reacting to it that's different from just letting it be there in its simplicity? So part of some emotions belong to those second arrows. Anger sometimes is a second arrow, anger toward yourself. So there are a variety of emotions that belong to this world of second arrows. And again, in mindfulness, we don't judge ourselves negatively for having second or third arrows. We try to wake up. We try to pay attention and notice what's going on. It doesn't matter if you can finally wake up at the 130th arrow. It just matters that you wake up. Waking up means that you notice it, that you're aware of it, and you don't add anything more. Just like, oh, okay, this is what I'm doing. Because if you get to the 130th arrow and you say, this is terrible, I shouldn't be doing this, then you've just added a 131st. Sooner or later, you either just forget what you're doing and become distracted, or you wake up and say, oh, okay, enough, and just step back and take in the bigger picture here. So let's do this meditation here. Take an alert, comfortable posture and gently close your eyes. And then before doing anything else, take a few moments to notice how you are, how you're feeling. What's your emotional state, your mood? There's always an emotional state or mood present, even if you don't recognize it. So how are you? And how are you about how you are? How are you relating to that? What are your judgments, thoughts, ideas, or reactions, if any? Then if you do recognize how you're feeling, reflect a little bit about how your feelings, your emotional state, might influence how you relate, interpret, react to this period of meditation. If you're sitting here and you're kind of grumpy, then are you likely to interpret things in an averse way as we go through here? If you're discouraged, are you likely to carry a little burden of being discouraged or feeling a little hopeless as you go about this? Is there some way in which your mood or emotional state could have an effect on this experience as we go forward? So then take a few long, slow, deep breaths as a way of beginning here. As you breathe in deeply here, expand your rib cage, front, back, shoulders. Feel the stretch like a massage. Then a slow, long exhale where you relax and let it go. Taking a deep breath in and relax as you exhale. And then let your breathing return to normal and scan through your body to see if there are any obvious places where you can soften the muscles. It might be possible to soften the muscles of the forehead, around the eyes and the jaws, cheeks, especially as you exhale. Send a softening wave through your head. And also your shoulders, shoulder blades. Perhaps you can soften the muscles of your chest, rib cage area, letting go of any holding, pressure. Also can be helpful when you meditate to let your belly be soft, hang forward. Perhaps you can feel the weight of your belly and let gravity gently let it settle. And then within your body, as part of your bodily experience, become aware of how your body experiences breathing. And then see if you can compose yourself, your attention, your presence around the experience of breathing, around the place in your body where you feel the breathing as most pronounced. Settle around that area, compose yourself around it, and then begin to hang in there, hang out there with the rhythm of breathing in, breathing out, the expansion and contraction. If your mind wanders away in thought, relax. Relax the thinking mind and begin again with your breathing. Let go of what you're thinking about. If you can stay with your breathing and thoughts are in the background, let them stay there in the background quietly. You don't have to take care of them or attend to them. Pick them up if in the foreground you can stay with your breath, breathing in, breathing out. Notice when you shift from a simple awareness of what's happening to getting involved in commentary or getting involved in reactions. If you can tease that apart, then return to the simplicity of your breathing. If you find yourself reacting to what's going on, it might be helpful to very calmly and softly in the mind name the reaction, like reaction, reacting, or some other name. Maybe it helps kind of free yourself a little bit from being caught in it. Then after a few moments of recognition, come back again to your breathing. Trust that for now, it's enough just to be aware of breathing. So now let go of the focus on your breathing and instead, again, notice what is the emotional state you have, the mood, the mental state, or if there is a kind of reactive state that's present. Very simply, see if you can recognize that reactive state and offer a kind of very simple awareness, like you're going to hang there with awareness, feeling what's happening, what you're feeling. And then see if you can find out where in your body that emotional state or mood is most manifested, most expressed. What sensations or feelings in your body let you know that you're having this emotional state? It could be you're calm or agitated. It could be that you're impatient or content. It could be you're peaceful, agitated, happy or sad, irritated, delighted, confused, eager. See if you can notice how the emotional state is expressed through your body, through sensations in your body. If your mood or emotional state changes or goes away, notice what replaces it. And as you do this, you can also very quietly label it or name it, letting the naming of it help you be simple with it, independent of it, but still feeling it. So then for the last minute of the sitting, come back again to your breathing and hang. hang out with your breathing as if it's the most important place to be. Everything else can recede to the background. I'd like to say a few more words about the actual instructions for mindfulness. Generally, I encourage people to put the breathing at the center of the meditation and with some encouragement to stay there because focusing on the breath can help stabilize the mind, help concentrate the mind, can help calm things down and strengthen the mindfulness. There are a lot of benefits to staying with the breathing, but if something else becomes more pronounced, more compelling than the breath, then the instruction is to let go of the breathing and take your meditative awareness and shift it to this other thing that is happening. Basically, meditate with that, bring your awareness to that, cultivate your mindfulness, your present awareness on that experience. So if something in your body, some strong sensations in your body, then rather than thinking of the sensations as a distraction, we take them as just something new to develop our meditation on. So new meditators often have to deal with discomforts. So within reason, we simply move our attention to the discomforts and we hold it in awareness, explore it in awareness, trying to be really simple, not getting caught up in the reactions or aversions or fears we might have toward it, and just to be present for it. If there are compelling or loud sounds, again, we don't treat them as distractions, but we treat it as listening meditation. Let go of the breath, and in a calm way, open up and take in the sounds as long as they are there. Sounds always happen in the present moments. So you're in the present moments when you're with a sound and your mindfulness of sound. Be present for that, experience that fully. So the same thing with emotions. If emotions become pronounced, compelling, or predominant, then they become the meditation subject. So again, you let go of your breath and you take in the experience of the emotion. It's a little bit tricky with emotions because some people get very easily entangled with their emotions. They get involved with them, or they resist them, or they judge them, or they do something with them. The trick is to have this very simple awareness of the emotion as it's going through us. There are a number of steps of aspects to mindfulness of emotions. The first one is the recognition that now an emotion has become predominant or compelling. Now there's an emotion that needs our attention. Sometimes that's not so easy for some people because some people are a little bit disconnected from their emotions. So it could be that there is an emotion that is having a really big effect on us. However, we kind of dismiss it or don't really think it's important, or we think other things are more important, like our thoughts or our stories. So there can be a dismissal of them or not valuing them. So part of mindfulness is to recognize when an emotion is present, when it needs attention. So the recognition is, oh, here it is. Sometimes the emotion hits us over the head if it's really strong and clear, so that the recognition part is pretty straightforward. So just recognize that you're having an emotional experience, a mood or something. The second step is called acceptance or allowance. And this is not being in any kind of conflict with the emotional experience you're having. So allowing it to be there in its freedom, to be there as it is. Meditation practice is a safe place to have your full range of emotions. You're welcome when you meditate to have murderous rage. Now, I don't know if it's such a good idea in other areas of your life. You might have to be wise in other areas of your life, how much you show it. If you have murderous rage toward your boss, maybe it's not so wise to let it be there. But meditation is this beautiful place, this safe place. You're committed to not moving. So you can just let it course through you and let it be there as it needs to be. So once it's there, we give it permission to just let it be there. So sometimes it's called acceptance, allowance, non-conflict, giving it permission to be there. For some people, that's a huge training to train oneself or develop oneself to be present for an emotional state while giving it permission to be there. Permission for it is to be there is certainly not the same as resistance, judging it, or being in conflict with it, but it's also not the same thing as giving into it. So if you've heard that in meditation, you can allow murderous rage. So then you think, okay, I'm really going to pump it up and get into it because it feels so good. Yes, that's kind of getting entangled with it. That's not simplicity of awareness either. So the idea is not to add on to it, to fuel it, to get engaged in it, but also not to repress it. So mindfulness meditation offers this wonderful middle way, a third alternative to either expression on one side or repression on the other. If you're expressing it, then you've gotten involved. If you're repressing it, then you're entangled. But what we're trying to do is, in sitting still in mindfulness, is just let it be there, neither repressed nor expressed. So the first step is to recognize it's there. The second is to allow it or accept it. It takes a while to learn that. Don't think you can do it overnight. It varies in how long it can take to learn to do that. The third step is to name it. The mental noting that is often done in this practice, using a simple label. As in the ancient folk tales, if you name the dragon loses its power. Or in some traditional cultures, you're given a birth name, and you shouldn't tell your birth name to anyone because then they would have some kind of power over you. There is power in naming. There is something about naming our experience which sometimes takes the power away from our experience, the power that comes from being identified with it, being entangled with it, being reactive with it, or feeding it or something. So very simply, in a very simple, calm way, as calm as you can be in your mind, just name it. Anger, anger, or happy, happy, or sad, sad, sad. The idea is that with naming it, you're trying to name it from a place in your being where you're not caught by it, not lost in it, not being swept up in it, whatever it might be. So if you do the mental noting, and when you're happy, you say happy, then you're in it. Just say happy, very simply. If you're angry and you say anger, you're in it. Just say very simply anger. So try to find that place in you that's not entangled, not caught in the experience. So you're not repressing it or not pushing it away, but just finding that adult-like place that can just be present in a stable way. Also, the mental noting has the function of being a gentle encouragement to you to stay present. So when there's an emotion, they don't disappear that quickly usually. So the emotion stays for a while. You can just keep naming it angry, angry, angry. It's also a little bit of an encouragement to stay there because the mind has such a tendency to wander off. One of the strong places it can wander off in where there are emotions is that it can wander off into the story. Some emotions are strongly connected to stories. In fact, I can be sitting, meditating, minding my own business peacefully, and there's the sound of a car driving by. And it reminds me of the kind of car that rear-ended me many, many years ago. Then that anger wells up, and it's partly because of the story. Why did they drive that way? Why didn't they stop? I should have given them a piece of my mind. And pretty soon I'm like in this other world. The idea in mindfulness meditation is to not get sucked into the story because you've spent a lifetime in the story. The idea is to come back. So by naming the experience, we're more likely to stay in the present. Anger, anger. Oh, that person. Come back, come back. That's the story. Anger, anger. Come back and be with the immediacy of what's here, with the anger. Be with the emotion of anger. Don't be with the story that's fueling it or connecting to it or that feeds off of it or is feeding it. So there is the recognition, the acceptance, the naming. Then the last thing is investigation. That is, once you have the ability to recognize, accept it, and start naming, be curious about it. Start investigating. What is this experience? Don't just hold it at a distance, but get close to it to find out what it is that. How is it really experienced? How do you experience it in your stomach? How do you experience it in your jaws? How do you experience it temperature-wise? What's actually being experienced when you're angry? What's the energy like in your system? Begin to explore it. That exploration is a movement of the mind which is adult-like, independent, not cowering or reacting to the experience, but simply, what is this? So one of the things that is very important in working with emotions is to explore how it is experienced in your body. What's the physical manifestation of it? And virtually every emotion you're going to have is not only going to be expressed in your body, but is your body. You wouldn't know what emotion you are having unless there was some kind of sensation in your body that corresponded with it. So some people, when they are afraid, their stomachs will get tight. Tightness will be there, and the shoulders get lifted up. Or if you're happy, you feel this softness that goes on, this warmth and tingling. If you're sad, you can feel the heaviness, the weight, the droopiness. So there's something that shifts and changes. Bring your attention closer to that physical side of the emotion. Feel the physical side of it. It's one way of avoiding getting caught up in the story, because the body is not a story. You're still connected with the emotion. You're present for it. You're present for how it is in the body. Also, the body, in a sense, has a wisdom of its own. Some emotions are fueled by the story-making mind. When they are experienced or manifested in the body wants to go to homeostasis, wants to go to healing, wants to come back to peace. So when it comes to like teaching mindfulness of emotion to kids, like 7 or 8 year olds, you have them act out their emotions. Like, show me how you are angry. And then saying, okay, now everyone freeze, and everyone freezes in different positions. And then say, okay, now to stop being angry, what do you need to do with your body? And then everyone can all relax their bodies. So it's a way of showing them how to pay attention to emotions, to connect with their bodies, and how their bodies can be an aid to having some mastery over their emotion. And they usually love it. It's a lot of fun. So the body doesn't want to stay tense. It wants to relax. So for those emotions that involve tension, there's a movement that the body wants to make. If the body's left alone, the body will relax. The body doesn't relax because the mind keeps reasserting its tensions, its resistance. So if you can drop down into the body and feel the emotion as a physical experience, you're kind of getting out of the way. The body has a chance to open up and allow the emotion to course through, to move and to evolve and resolve and dissolve. So in that line, I'm fond of the fact that the word emotion in English comes from the Latin word for motion, movement. The E part means out, so move out. So all emotions are processes. They are processes that want to move out unless they are frozen. So resentment is frozen anger. So to misquote Charlie Brown, bad grief is frozen grief, or bad grief is frozen grief. Grief is grief, and everyone experiences that sooner or later. Then there is grief that gets frozen. So certain emotions get frozen, and then the process, the evolution, the movement doesn't happen. But left alone, all emotions want to move through. That's one of the reasons why sometimes with certain emotions we say, well, I just have to give this time. If you give them time, things can sort of settle and to some degree take care of themselves. So if we can experience the emotion as an embodied experience, the emotional life has an easier time to move through us, to change and shift. And it shifts in different ways. Sometimes it resolves, quiets down. Sometimes it gets stronger before it gets freer. So say sometimes you feel a little bit of irritation, and then that irritation, because you're present for it, explodes like this big volcano of huge fury. The fury was very deep inside and finally has a chance to come out. So it's not all a linear process where as soon as you're mindful, you're better. But this wisdom, this kind of inner movement, this trust in mindfulness, if you can trust it, it can go in all kind of different directions. And we consider that part of the healing or part of the resolution that it has to take. So just stay present and watch it go through its shifts and changes. So in that last meditation, I asked you to notice your emotions, your emotional state, your mood. So what was that like for some of you? What did you notice when you actually brought your attention to that part of your experience? And one of the things about emotional states or mental states is that Buddhism distinguishes those which are born out of reactions or reactivity, or are born in relationship to things in the world, versus emotions which arise when the inner system, like the heart, the mind, the body, are open channels, free and present and stable, but not reactive or responding to anything. So many emotions have to do with our relationships with things around us. So for example, if I win the lottery, if I follow the usual pattern, apparently according to scholars who've studied it, I'll be really happy at first, and then after a year, I feel pretty miserable. So the happiness and the misery have a lot to do with my relationship to things in the world. So we have all these experiences in life. People like us, people don't like us. We have failure in life. We get what we want, we don't get what we want. There are all these things that happen. We get sick, we get healthy. So all these things can affect our mood or our emotional state. To some degree, this is normal and healthy. To some degree, it can be very unhealthy to be always very caught up in the world of always having our emotional state tied to or relating to the experience of how things are in the world. Because then you're just like a slave. You're always just pushed around by the winds of the world. So that's one kind of emotion that arises, emotions that arise because of our relationship with the world. There's a whole other category of emotional states that have much more to do with not being in relationship to the world. When we're not caught in relationship, when we're liberated, we're free from all that for and against. The system is just open and flowing. There can be a tremendous amount of what can be called maybe unrelated joy or happiness or peace. Peace, joy, happiness that bubbles up not because anything is going right or wrong. It doesn't have a reason or a cause or condition or catalyst for it in how things are going in the world. And that's a phenomenal thing, to discover a happiness or well-being that's not dependent on how things are going. Part of the possibility as we do this practice and learn how to just be present for things as they are and free ourselves from the commentary and the reactions and just be present is that in time you will discover this tremendous treasure and source of tremendous power in your life also. This happiness that doesn't require you to win the lottery or have people like you or think well of you. So there are these two different realms. Generally, the shift over time for people who do meditation practices, they start shifting to having more and more of the unrelated emotions, away from the related or reactive ones. But the key to doing that or making that shift to the personal growth that happens during meditation has a lot to do with just staying present in a very simple way, to be present for what is. Don't be present for what you want to happen. Just be present for what is, and just be as simple as you can for that. Try not to have an agenda. Try not to have commentaries. If you do have them, all you're asked to do then is know that that's there. Just know it's there, know it's there, know it's there. Just stay in the knowing of this is what's happening now. This is what's happening now. And see if you can avoid adding a second arrow. And if you add a second arrow, just be very allowing of that. Okay, there's a second arrow. Wow, that's what a second arrow is like. As opposed to shoot, because then you have the third arrow. So it takes a while to get the hang of it. But I hope you're getting the feel of how this practice goes. It's meant to be very, very simple. Because it's so simple, it takes a while to get the hang of it, because we always think we have to do something. So get into your emotions. The more you know about it, the easier it is to be free of it and practice with it. But another reason is that the more you are familiar with the world of emotions, the easier it will be to understand next week, which is mindfulness of thinking, because thinking has a very close connection with emotions, and it's easier to be free of your thinking if you know how to be free in relationship to your emotions. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.